Question 1. Analysis of how an organization can effectively secure its diverse Internet of Things (IoT) device ecosystem, considering the varying security capabilities of different vendors and the need to comply with relevant U.S. cybersecurity regulations when faced with the dual pressures of rapid deployment and budget constraints. Option A. Implement a comprehensive, risk-based security strategy that includes vendor security assessments, network segmentation, data encryption, and a robust vulnerability management program, ensuring compliance with U.S. regulatory frameworks. Option B. Adopt a wait-and-see approach, addressing security concerns only after an IoT-related security incident has occurred to minimize upfront costs. Option C. Focus primarily on deploying endpoint security software on all IoT devices, assuming that individual device protection is sufficient to meet regulatory requirements. Option D. Select IoT devices based solely on the lowest cost, without conducting thorough security assessments or considering vendor security practices, to stay within budget. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive risk-based security strategy that includes vendor security assessments, network segmentation, data encryption, and a robust vulnerability management program, ensuring compliance with U.S. regulatory frameworks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IoT security, balancing the rapid deployment of new devices with the need for robust security and compliance. Organizations often face pressure to innovate quickly, which can lead to security being an afterthought. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing appropriate security controls that meet regulatory requirements without stifling innovation or incurring prohibitive costs. The diversity of IoT devices, their deployment environments, and the varying levels of security maturity across vendors further complicate this. Careful judgment is required to select security measures that are effective, scalable, and compliant with relevant regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, risk-based strategy that integrates security throughout the IoT device lifecycle, from procurement to decommissioning. This aligns with the principles of security by design and by default, as advocated by various cybersecurity frameworks and regulatory guidance. Specifically, it emphasizes establishing clear security requirements for vendors, implementing network segmentation to isolate IoT devices, encrypting data both in transit and at rest, and ensuring regular patching and vulnerability management. This proactive and layered security posture is crucial for mitigating the unique risks associated with IoT, such as a large attack surface, limited processing power on devices, and potential for physical tampering. Compliance with regulations like the NIST cybersecurity framework or specific industry mandates, e.g., healthcare IoT regulations, is achieved by embedding these security practices into the organization's overall security program. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on endpoint security without considering network segmentation or data encryption is an incomplete approach. This failure to implement a layered defense leaves the organization vulnerable to lateral movement by attackers if an endpoint is compromised, and sensitive data could be exposed. Regulatory frameworks often mandate defense-in-depth strategies, and neglecting network security or data protection would be a significant compliance failure. Implementing security measures only after a breach has occurred is a reactive and insufficient strategy. This approach demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and fails to meet the security by design principles expected in modern cybersecurity practices and regulatory compliance. Many regulations require organizations to have robust incident prevention and preparedness measures in place, not just response capabilities. Prioritizing cost savings over security requirements when selecting IoT devices without a thorough risk assessment is a direct violation of due diligence and prudent security practices. This can lead to the procurement of devices with known vulnerabilities or inadequate security features, creating significant compliance and security risks. Regulatory bodies often expect organizations to demonstrate that they have taken reasonable steps to ensure the security of the systems they deploy, which includes responsible procurement. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, aligning security controls with the specific threats and vulnerabilities of IoT deployments. This involves understanding the regulatory landscape applicable to their industry and jurisdiction, and integrating security requirements into the entire IoT lifecycle. A continuous improvement mindset, including regular auditing and vulnerability management, is essential. When faced with vendor selection, a thorough assessment of their security practices and device capabilities, alongside a clear understanding of contractual security obligations, is paramount. Decision-making should be guided by established cybersecurity frameworks and legal/regulatory requirements, ensuring that security is a foundational element, not an add-on. Question 2. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly migrating sensitive customer data to cloud environments. A cloud service provider, operating under U.S. federal regulations and state-specific privacy laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, needs to implement a robust data security program. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data lifecycle management and privacy requirements? Option A. Rely exclusively on client-provided data security policies and data retention schedules, without independently verifying their alignment with applicable U.S. federal and state privacy regulations. Option B. Encrypt all data at rest and in transit using strong algorithms, but defer detailed data classification and the establishment of specific data retention and disposal schedules until a data breach occurs. Option C. Focus primarily on implementing advanced data loss prevention, DLP, solutions to monitor and block unauthorized data exfiltration, assuming this will cover most data security concerns. Option D. Implement a comprehensive data lifecycle management program that includes granular data classification, encryption for data at rest and in transit, strong access controls, defined data retention and disposal policies, and regular auditing of data handling processes. The correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive data lifecycle management program that includes granular data classification, encryption for data at rest and in transit, strong access controls, defined data retention and disposal policies, and regular auditing of data handling processes. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a cloud service provider to balance the imperative of data privacy and security with the operational needs of its clients, all while adhering to stringent regulatory frameworks. The core challenge lies in implementing effective data lifecycle management controls that satisfy the requirements of multiple, potentially overlapping data privacy regulations without compromising service delivery or introducing undue risk. Careful judgment is required to select controls that are both compliant and practical in a cloud environment. Correct approach involves implementing a comprehensive data lifecycle management strategy that incorporates granular data classification, robust encryption for data at rest and in transit, and a well-defined data retention and disposal policy, all underpinned by strong data governance and regular auditing. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core tenets of data protection mandated by regulations like GDPR and CCPA. Specifically, data classification enables the application of appropriate security controls based on sensitivity, encryption protects data confidentiality, and defined retention/disposal policies ensure data is not held longer than necessary, minimizing breach impact, and complying with data minimization principles. Auditing and governance provide the necessary oversight to ensure these controls are effective and consistently applied, demonstrating due diligence and accountability. An approach that focuses solely on encrypting data at rest and in transit without a clear data classification scheme is incorrect. While encryption is vital without classification, the provider might over-encrypt less sensitive data, leading to performance issues, or under-encrypt highly sensitive data, creating a compliance gap. This fails to meet the principle of data minimization and proportionality often found in privacy regulations. An approach that prioritizes client-defined data retention policies over regulatory mandates is also incorrect. While client needs are important, regulatory requirements for data retention and disposal are legally binding. Ignoring these can lead to significant fines and legal repercussions. This demonstrates a failure in understanding the hierarchy of compliance obligations. Finally, an approach that relies solely on data loss prevention, DLP tools without a comprehensive data lifecycle management framework is insufficient. DLP tools are reactive or preventative measures for data exfiltration, but they do not address the foundational aspects of data security throughout its lifecycle, such as secure creation, classification, encryption, and compliant disposal. This leaves gaps in the overall security posture and compliance strategy. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulatory requirements, e.g., GDPR, CCPA. This should be followed by a risk assessment to identify sensitive data types and their lifecycle stages. Based on this, a layered security strategy should be designed, incorporating data classification, encryption access controls, DLP, and robust data governance. Regular auditing and continuous monitoring are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulations. Question 3. The control framework reveals a critical vulnerability in the organization's public cloud-based customer relationship management (CRM) SaaS application. To address this, a security team proposes implementing a new, highly restrictive network access control policy. Which of the following approaches best aligns with sound cloud security architecture and design principles for managing this change? Option A. Prioritize the implementation of the most technically advanced network security controls available, regardless of their compatibility with the existing SaaS CRM application. Option B. Implement the new network access control policy in a development or staging environment without informing the CRM application owners or end users about the potential changes. Option C. Immediately deploy the new network access control policy to the production CRM environment to mitigate the identified vulnerability as quickly as possible. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the potential effects of the new network access control policy on CRM application functionality, user access, data integrity, and integration with other business systems before deployment. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the potential effects of the new network access control policy on CRM application functionality, user access, data integrity, and integration with other business systems before deployment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for enhanced security controls with the potential for significant disruption to critical business operations and the need to adhere to established cloud governance and compliance frameworks. A hasty or poorly planned implementation of security controls can lead to unintended consequences, including service outages, data loss, and non-compliance with regulatory mandates. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security improvements are effective, efficient, and aligned with the organization's overall cloud strategy and risk appetite. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment before implementing new security controls. This assessment should evaluate the potential effects of the proposed changes on cloud services, applications, data, and user access. It necessitates understanding the interdependencies within the cloud environment and identifying any risks of disruption. By systematically analyzing these impacts, the organization can proactively identify mitigation strategies, plan for necessary downtime or phased rollouts, and ensure that the new controls do not introduce new vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. This aligns with best practices in cloud security architecture and design, emphasizing a risk-based and holistic approach to security management, as often mandated by frameworks like NIST or ISO 27001, which are foundational to CCSP. Implementing security controls without a prior impact assessment is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks causing service disruptions, negatively impacting business continuity, and potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, with users or customers. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to sound cloud design principles that prioritize stability and availability alongside security. Furthermore, it can lead to the introduction of unintended security weaknesses if the controls are not properly integrated, creating new attack vectors. This also represents a failure in due diligence and risk management, which are core ethical and regulatory expectations for cybersecurity professionals. Deploying security controls in a reactive, ad hoc manner without considering their broader implications is also professionally unsound. This approach often results in fragmented security solutions that are difficult to manage, maintain, and integrate with existing systems. It can lead to increased operational overhead and a false sense of security, as critical interdependencies might be overlooked. From a compliance perspective, such an approach often fails to demonstrate a systematic and documented process for security control implementation, which is a common requirement in audits and assessments. Choosing to implement controls that are known to be incompatible with the existing cloud infrastructure, even if they offer perceived security benefits, is a significant professional failure. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the current environment and a disregard for the principles of interoperability and integration in cloud architecture. Such actions can lead to system instability, data corruption, and a complete breakdown of critical services, directly contravening the objective of enhancing security without compromising operational integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with identifying potential security threats and vulnerabilities. Next, a comprehensive assessment of the impact of proposed controls on the cloud environment, including services, applications, data, and business processes, must be conducted. This assessment should inform the selection and design of controls, prioritizing those that offer the best balance of security, performance, and availability. Finally, a phased implementation plan with robust testing and rollback procedures should be developed and executed, ensuring continuous monitoring and validation of control effectiveness and operational stability. Question 4. Research into the security posture of a newly developed cloud-native application reveals that it handles sensitive customer data and is scheduled for imminent deployment. The development team is under pressure to meet aggressive release timelines. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a risk-based methodology for ensuring the application's security before and during deployment? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, informing the selection and prioritization of security controls, including secure coding practices, authentication, authorization, and input validation, before proceeding with deployment. Option B. Implement the most advanced security technologies available for cloud applications, such as next-generation WAFs and intrusion detection systems, without a detailed analysis of the application's specific threat landscape. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment by releasing the application with minimal security testing, relying on post-deployment patching for any identified vulnerabilities. Option D. Focus exclusively on securing the network perimeter with robust firewall rules and access controls, assuming that internal application vulnerabilities will be less critical. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities, informing the selection and prioritization of security controls, including secure coding practices, authentication, authorization, and input validation, before proceeding with deployment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for rapid deployment with the long-term security posture of a critical cloud application. The pressure to deliver features quickly can lead to shortcuts in security, which, if not managed through a structured risk assessment, can expose sensitive data and compromise the application's integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security is not an afterthought, but an integrated component of the development and deployment process, aligned with regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the cloud application and its environment. This assessment should inform the selection and implementation of appropriate security controls, including secure coding practices, robust authentication and authorization mechanisms, and effective input validation. By proactively identifying and mitigating risks, this approach aligns with the principle of security by design and demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive information, which is a fundamental requirement under various cybersecurity regulations and ethical standards for professionals. The CCSP framework emphasizes a risk-based approach to cloud security, ensuring that controls are proportionate to the identified risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the latest security technologies without a prior risk assessment fails to address the specific threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the application. This can lead to misallocation of resources and the implementation of controls that are either insufficient or unnecessary, creating a false sense of security. This approach neglects the foundational step of understanding the risk landscape, which is a critical failure in professional cybersecurity practice and regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes rapid deployment over security testing, such as skipping SAST and DAST, directly violates established secure software development lifecycle SDLC principles. This oversight can allow exploitable vulnerabilities, like those commonly found in the OWASP Top 10, to be deployed into production. Such a failure to test for known weaknesses represents a significant breach of professional responsibility and regulatory expectations for application security. An approach that relies solely on perimeter security, such as a web application firewall, WAF, without addressing internal application vulnerabilities is also professionally unsound. While a WAF provides a layer of defense, it does not mitigate risks inherent in the application's code or configuration. Over-reliance on such controls without a comprehensive security strategy, including secure coding and internal testing, leaves the application exposed to attacks that bypass the WAF, a clear deficiency in a risk-based security posture. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with understanding the business context and the criticality of the application. Next, a comprehensive threat modeling exercise should be performed, followed by a detailed risk assessment to identify and prioritize vulnerabilities. Security controls should then be selected and implemented based on this assessment, with a strong emphasis on integrating security throughout the SDLC. Continuous monitoring and regular reassessment of risks are also crucial to adapt to evolving threats and changes in the application environment. This systematic approach ensures that security efforts are targeted, effective, and compliant with professional standards and regulatory requirements. Question 5. The efficiency study reveals that a critical cloud security incident has occurred, impacting customer data. The incident response team has identified a potential malware infection that is actively exfiltrating data. Which of the following approaches best balances immediate threat mitigation with legal and regulatory compliance requirements for data breach notification and evidence preservation? Option A. Prioritize forensic imaging of all affected systems to preserve all potential evidence, even if it means a temporary delay in disconnecting systems from the network, and then begin analysis. Option B. Issue a public statement acknowledging a potential security incident and assuring customers that all necessary steps are being taken, while the technical team begins a broad, uncoordinated investigation. Option C. Immediately disconnect all affected systems from the network to prevent further data exfiltration. Then initiate a full system wipe and restore from backups, documenting the actions taken. Option D. Immediately disconnect all affected systems from the network to prevent further data exfiltration. Then conduct a rapid analysis to understand the scope and nature of the breach before proceeding with eradication and recovery, ensuring legal counsel is engaged for notification guidance. The correct answer is C. Immediately disconnect all affected systems from the network to prevent further data exfiltration, then initiate a full system wipe and restore from backups, documenting the actions taken. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals that the cloud incident response plan's effectiveness is significantly impacted by the speed and accuracy of its execution during a critical security event. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate containment needs with the long-term implications of data integrity and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data breach notification timelines. A rushed or incomplete response can lead to further damage, regulatory penalties, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actions that mitigate immediate threats while preserving evidence and adhering to legal obligations. The correct approach involves a structured, multi-phased incident response methodology that aligns with established best practices and regulatory frameworks. This approach prioritizes accurate detection and analysis to understand the scope and nature of the incident. Containment strategies are then implemented to limit the spread of the threat, followed by eradication of the root cause. Recovery procedures are executed to restore normal operations, and crucially, post-incident activities ensure lessons are learned and documented. This systematic process is essential for meeting legal and regulatory requirements, such as those mandated by data protection laws, which often stipulate specific notification periods and reporting obligations. Adhering to this structured methodology ensures that all necessary steps are taken to protect data, comply with regulations, and minimize business impact. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate system restoration without thorough analysis risks overlooking the root cause, leading to recurring incidents and potential data compromise. This failure to adequately investigate and eradicate the threat can result in significant regulatory penalties for noncompliance with data protection mandates, which require a comprehensive understanding of breaches. Another incorrect approach that delays containment to preserve all potential forensic data indefinitely, without considering the active threat, can lead to widespread damage and a more severe breach. This inaction can violate the duty of care to protect customer data, and may also contravene data breach notification laws that require timely reporting once a breach is confirmed. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes public relations over accurate reporting and legal consultation can lead to premature or misleading statements, potentially violating disclosure requirements and damaging credibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the incident response plan's objectives, including legal and regulatory compliance. This involves assessing the incident's impact, prioritizing containment and eradication based on risk, and ensuring that forensic preservation is balanced with the need for timely action. Communication protocols, including legal counsel and regulatory bodies, should be activated early. The framework should also incorporate a continuous learning loop, where post-incident reviews inform future plan improvements and training. Question 6. Comparative studies suggest that in the event of a critical cloud security incident impacting service availability, a cloud security operations team faces a dilemma. Prioritize immediate service restoration to minimize business disruption, or meticulously follow a comprehensive incident response plan that may prolong downtime but ensures thorough containment, eradication, and forensic analysis. Which approach best aligns with CCSP principles and regulatory expectations for cloud security operations? Option A. Rely solely on pre-configured automated remediation scripts to address the incident, without direct human intervention during the initial response phase. Option B. Immediately restore services to their pre-incident state using automated rollback procedures, assuming the incident is fully resolved by the rollback. Option C. Implement a phased recovery process, prioritizing restoration of critical services while concurrently executing containment, eradication, and forensic steps, ensuring all actions are logged and temporary deviations are documented and addressed post-incident. Option D. Halt all cloud operations indefinitely until a complete forensic investigation can be performed and all systems are confirmed to be in a pristine pre-incident state. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased recovery process, prioritizing restoration of critical services while concurrently executing containment, eradication, and forensic steps, ensuring all actions are logged and temporary deviations are documented and addressed post-incident. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational needs and long-term security and compliance mandates within a cloud environment. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established security controls and auditing processes, potentially creating significant compliance and security risks. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of incident response with the necessity of adhering to regulatory frameworks and best practices for cloud security operations. The correct approach involves a structured incident response process that prioritizes containment, eradication, and recovery, while simultaneously documenting all actions and ensuring that any temporary deviations from standard configurations are logged, justified, and remediated promptly. This aligns with CCSP principles that emphasize a holistic approach to cloud security, encompassing not just technical controls, but also procedural adherence and continuous monitoring. Specifically, this approach respects the principles of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that even during an incident, unauthorized access or further compromise is minimized. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and financial services, depending on the specific cloud service and data handled, often mandate robust incident response and logging capabilities, requiring thorough documentation of all actions taken during an incident to demonstrate due diligence and compliance. An incorrect approach that involves immediately restoring services without proper containment or analysis would fail to address the root cause of the incident, potentially leaving the system vulnerable to reinfection or further exploitation. This bypasses critical steps in incident response, such as forensic analysis and eradication, and would likely violate logging and auditing requirements, making it impossible to demonstrate compliance with regulatory mandates that require a clear understanding of security events and the actions taken to mitigate them. Another incorrect approach, which is to halt all operations indefinitely until a perfect, pre-incident state can be restored, is also professionally unacceptable. While thoroughness is important, an indefinite halt can lead to significant business disruption and may itself violate service-level agreements, SLAs, or compliance requirements related to availability and business continuity. This approach fails to balance security with operational realities and may not be a feasible or proportionate response to the incident. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on automated remediation tools without human oversight during a critical incident, carries significant risks. While automation is valuable, complex or novel incidents may require nuanced human judgment to avoid unintended consequences, such as disrupting legitimate business processes or inadvertently causing data loss. Over-reliance on automation without a clear understanding of its limitations in a crisis can lead to misdiagnosis or inappropriate actions, undermining the incident response objectives and potentially creating new security or operational issues. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear incident response plan that is regularly tested and updated. When an incident occurs, the team should follow the plan, prioritizing containment and assessment. Decisions regarding recovery and remediation should be made based on risk assessment, considering the potential impact on security, compliance, and business operations. All actions, including any deviations from standard procedures, must be meticulously documented, and a post-incident review should be conducted to identify lessons learned and improve future response capabilities. This iterative process of planning, execution, documentation, and review is fundamental to effective cloud security operations and compliance. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive identity governance and administration (IGA) solution with automated access recertification and integrating it with a robust privileged access management (PAM) system will significantly reduce operational overhead and improve audit readiness, but requires an initial investment in technology and training. Which approach best balances these factors while adhering to stringent security and compliance mandates? Option A. Implement an IGA solution for automated access reviews and recertification, coupled with a PAM system for managing and monitoring privileged accounts. Option B. Grant all development team members full administrative privileges to all cloud resources to accelerate deployment cycles and reduce the need for access request processing. Option C. Deploy a single sign-on SSO solution to streamline user access across all cloud services, assuming users will manage their own access levels appropriately. Option D. Continue with manual, quarterly access reviews conducted by IT staff, supplemented by ad hoc requests for privileged access as needed. The correct answer is A. Implement an IGA solution for automated access reviews and recertification, coupled with a PAM system for managing and monitoring privileged accounts. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate operational efficiency gains of a streamlined IAM process against the long-term security and compliance risks associated with potentially overprivileged access. The CCSP certification emphasizes a risk-based approach, and a hasty implementation without proper controls can lead to significant security breaches and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process optimization does not compromise the principle of least privilege. The correct approach involves implementing a robust identity governance and administration (IGA) solution that automates the review and recertification of access rights, coupled with a well-defined privileged access management (PAM) strategy. This approach directly addresses the core challenge by providing visibility and control over who has access to what, especially privileged accounts. Regulatory frameworks, such as those underpinning the CCSP, which often align with U.S. federal standards like NIST SB 800-53 for federal information systems, and by extension, common industry best practices, mandate regular access reviews and the principle of least privilege. An IGA solution automates these reviews, reducing manual effort and the potential for human error, while PAM ensures that privileged access is strictly controlled, monitored, and time-bound. This aligns with the ethical imperative to protect sensitive data and systems. Implementing a solution that solely focuses on single sign-on SSO without addressing the underlying authorization and privilege management is an incorrect approach. While SSO improves user experience and can centralize authentication, it does not inherently solve the problem of excessive permissions. If users are granted broad access through SSO, they retain that access across all federated applications, increasing the attack surface. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for granular access control and the principle of least privilege. Adopting a policy of granting broad administrative access to all developers to expedite deployment cycles is a critically incorrect approach. This directly violates the principle of least privilege, a cornerstone of secure IAM. Such a policy creates an unacceptable risk of accidental or malicious misuse of elevated privileges, leading to data breaches, system compromise, and severe regulatory penalties. It also undermines the need for auditability and accountability, as it becomes difficult to trace specific actions to individuals when everyone has the same high level of access. Relying solely on manual access reviews conducted quarterly without any automation is also an incorrect approach. While manual reviews are a component of good governance, they are prone to delays, inconsistencies, and the sheer volume of access requests can overwhelm security teams, leading to overlooked risks. This approach is inefficient and increases the likelihood of prolonged periods of inappropriate access, which is a direct contravention of the proactive security and compliance posture expected under CCSP guidelines. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, identifying critical assets and the types of access required. This should be followed by designing an IAM architecture that incorporates the principles of least privilege, separation of duties, and regular access reviews. Leveraging automation through IGA and PAM solutions should be prioritized to ensure scalability, efficiency, and compliance. Continuous monitoring and auditing are essential to detect and respond to anomalies. Finally, any process optimization must be validated against security and compliance requirements before implementation. Question 8. Regulatory review indicates that a financial services organization operating in the cloud must demonstrate robust business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities to ensure uninterrupted service availability and data integrity. The organization is considering several strategies to enhance its resilience following a recent localized outage that impacted a critical customer-facing application. Which of the following approaches best aligns with CCSP BCDR principles and regulatory expectations for such an organization? Option A. Deploy a cost-effective BCDR solution that prioritizes minimal infrastructure investment, accepting a higher RTO and RPO for most applications to reduce operational expenses, with a plan to address critical applications on a case-by-case basis during an incident. Option B. Rely on scheduled manual backups of critical application data to object storage in a different availability zone, with a documented procedure for manual restoration in the event of a disaster, assuming a longer RTO is acceptable for non-critical functions. Option C. Utilize a single cloud region with a highly available architecture for critical applications, assuming that the cloud provider's inherent resilience is sufficient to mitigate the need for a separate disaster recovery plan. Option D. Implement a cloud-native disaster recovery solution that leverages automated data replication to a secondary region, configured with failover mechanisms designed to meet defined recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, supported by a comprehensive, regularly tested BCDR plan and communication strategy. Correct answer is D. Implement a cloud-native disaster recovery solution that leverages automated data replication to a secondary region, configured with failover mechanisms designed to meet defined recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, supported by a comprehensive, regularly tested BCDR plan and communication strategy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of maintaining business operations and data integrity in a cloud environment, especially when faced with a significant disruption. The organization must balance the immediate need for recovery with long-term resilience and compliance. Careful judgment is required to select a BCDR strategy that aligns with regulatory mandates, business objectives, and technical feasibility. The correct approach involves a comprehensive BCDR plan that incorporates cloud-native disaster recovery solutions, regular testing, and clear failover/failback procedures. This strategy directly addresses the CCSP domain of business continuity and disaster recovery by ensuring that RTO and RPO objectives are met through robust technical mechanisms like data replication and high availability architectures. Regulatory compliance is inherently supported by having a tested and documented plan that can withstand disruptions, thereby protecting sensitive data and ensuring service availability as mandated by relevant frameworks. The emphasis on testing and validation ensures that the plan is not merely theoretical but practically effective, a key requirement for professional due diligence. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on manual backup and restore processes without automated failover. This fails to meet typical RTO requirements for critical applications, as manual intervention is inherently slower and more prone to error during a crisis. From a regulatory perspective, this approach often falls short of demonstrating due diligence in protecting data and ensuring service continuity, potentially leading to non-compliance and significant business impact. Another incorrect approach is to implement a cloud-based BCDR solution without adequate testing or documentation. While the technology might be sound, the lack of validation means its effectiveness in a real disaster is unknown. This poses a significant regulatory risk, as organizations are expected to have proven BCDR capabilities, not just theoretical ones. Furthermore, without proper documentation, training and communication plans are compromised, hindering effective response during an incident. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize cost optimization over meeting RTO/RPO objectives. While cost is a consideration, it should not compromise the fundamental requirements for business continuity and disaster recovery. A BCDR strategy that is too cheap to be effective will ultimately be more costly in terms of lost revenue, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties when a disaster occurs. This demonstrates a failure to understand the core purpose of BCDR and its alignment with business resilience and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, understanding of business criticality, alignment with regulatory requirements, e.g., data protection laws, industry-specific mandates, and evaluation of available cloud BCDR technologies. Professionals must then develop, document, test, and regularly review their BCDR plans, ensuring that they are practical, cost-effective, and meet defined RTO/RPO targets. Continuous improvement based on testing and evolving threats is paramount. Question 9. Consider a scenario where a financial services firm is migrating sensitive customer data to a public cloud environment and must ensure compliance with U.S. financial regulations, such as those enforced by the SEC and FINRA, and adhere to the NIST cybersecurity framework. The firm needs to conduct a thorough security assessment of its cloud deployment and the cloud service provider's CSP security controls. Which of the following approaches would be the most appropriate and compliant? Option A. Rely solely on the cloud service provider's marketing materials and their self-reported security capabilities to gauge the security posture. Option B. Focus exclusively on performing aggressive, unannounced penetration tests against the cloud infrastructure to identify exploitable vulnerabilities. Option C. Implement a broad vulnerability scanning program across all cloud assets without a defined assessment methodology or framework. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive security assessment guided by the NIST cybersecurity framework, incorporating vulnerability scanning, configuration assessment, and a review of the CSP's compliance documentation and audit reports, while also performing independent verification of key controls. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive security assessment guided by the NIST cybersecurity framework, incorporating vulnerability scanning, configuration assessment, and a review of the CSP's compliance documentation and audit reports, while also performing independent verification of key controls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud security auditing, balancing the need for comprehensive security assessments with the operational realities and contractual obligations of a cloud service provider, CSP. The core difficulty lies in selecting an assessment methodology that is both effective in identifying vulnerabilities and compliant with the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations, while also respecting the CSP's established auditing procedures and limitations. Failure to do so can lead to ineffective security controls, regulatory noncompliance, and potential contractual disputes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging a recognized cloud security framework, such as the NIST CyberSecurity Framework or ISO 27017, to guide the assessment. This framework provides a structured and comprehensive set of controls and best practices specifically designed for cloud environments. By aligning the assessment with a framework, the organization ensures that its audit covers critical areas like access control, data security, incident response, and compliance. Furthermore, it allows for a systematic evaluation of the CSP's security posture against established industry standards. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes robust security and compliance, and it is regulatorily justified by the need to adhere to frameworks that underpin many compliance requirements. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on vulnerability scanning without a broader framework is an insufficient approach. While vulnerability scanning is a critical component of security assessment, it is a tactical tool that identifies specific weaknesses. Without a strategic framework, the assessment may miss systemic issues, misconfigurations, or gaps in governance and policy, leading to a false sense of security. This can result in regulatory noncompliance if the framework is a mandated requirement. Adopting a penetration testing methodology without prior risk assessment and a clear understanding of the CSP's acceptable use policies is also problematic. Penetration testing, while valuable for simulating real-world attacks, can be disruptive and may violate contractual agreements with the CSP if not properly coordinated. It also lacks the structured, comprehensive coverage of a framework-based audit, potentially leading to an incomplete picture of the security posture. Ethically, this approach could be seen as reckless if it risks service disruption or unauthorized access. Relying exclusively on the CSP's self-attestation reports without independent verification is a significant failure. While CSPs provide attestations, e.g., SOC2 reports, these are based on their own internal assessments. A responsible organization must conduct its own due diligence and independent assessments to validate the effectiveness of the CSP's controls and ensure they meet the organization's specific security and compliance needs. This approach fails to meet the ethical obligation of due care and can lead to regulatory penalties if the organization cannot demonstrate its own compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based, framework-aligned approach. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory and compliance landscape applicable to the organization. 2. Identifying relevant cloud security frameworks, e.g., NIST ISO, that align with these requirements. 3. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify critical assets and potential threats in the cloud environment. 4. Developing a comprehensive security assessment plan that incorporates various methodologies, vulnerability scanning, configuration assessment, etc., within the chosen framework. 5. Collaborating with the CSP to understand their auditing processes and limitations, ensuring transparency and adherence to contractual agreements. 6. Performing independent verification of CSP controls and security posture. 7. Documenting all findings, risks, and remediation efforts and reporting them to relevant stakeholders. Question 10. The audit findings indicate that a serverless function, responsible for processing user-uploaded images, has been granted read and write access to the entire object storage bucket, rather than just the specific subdirectory designated for image uploads. This broad access significantly exceeds the function's operational requirements. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Classify the finding as a low-priority issue, as the function is only executed when an image is uploaded, and address it during the next routine security review. Option B. Revoke the serverless function's access to the entire object storage bucket and reconfigure it with granular permissions to access only the designated image upload subdirectory. Option C. Document the finding and recommend a future architectural change to implement a separate, more restricted storage bucket for image uploads. Option D. Implement additional network access control lists, ACL, at the bucket level to restrict access to the specific subdirectory, while leaving the function's permissions unchanged. The correct answer is B. Revoke the serverless function's access to the entire object storage bucket and reconfigure it with granular permissions to access only the designated image upload subdirectory. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the serverless function's authorization mechanism, specifically regarding the principle of least privilege. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with robust security controls in a dynamic serverless environment. The rapid deployment and ephemeral nature of serverless functions can sometimes lead to oversight in granular access control, making it difficult to maintain a clear security posture without impacting development velocity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security measures are effective without creating undue friction for developers. The correct approach involves immediately revoking the overly broad permissions granted to the serverless function and reconfiguring it with the minimum necessary privileges to perform its intended task. This aligns with the fundamental security principle of least privilege, which is a cornerstone of secure system design and is implicitly or explicitly mandated by various cybersecurity frameworks and best practices relevant to the CCSP certification. For instance, NIST SB 800-53, a foundational document for U.S. federal information systems and often referenced in CCSP, emphasizes the principle of least privilege in access control, AC controls. Ethically, it is the responsibility of a cybersecurity professional to address identified vulnerabilities promptly to protect the organization's assets and data. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the finding as a low-priority issue due to the function's perceived limited impact or infrequent execution. This fails to acknowledge that even seemingly minor misconfigurations can be exploited as entry points for more sophisticated attacks, violating the duty to protect the organization's information assets. Another incorrect approach would be to delay remediation until the next scheduled maintenance window without implementing temporary compensating controls. This demonstrates a lack of urgency in addressing security risks and could expose the organization to immediate threats, contravening the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of the organization's security. Finally, attempting to fix the issue by simply adding more security layers on top of the existing misconfiguration without addressing the root cause of the overly broad permissions is also an incorrect approach. This creates a false sense of security and does not adhere to best practices for secure serverless architecture, which advocate for addressing vulnerabilities at their source. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach. First, assess the severity and potential impact of the identified vulnerability. Second, consult relevant security frameworks and organizational policies to determine the appropriate remediation steps. Third, prioritize immediate actions to mitigate high-risk findings, even if it requires temporary workarounds or expedited deployment. Finally, ensure that all remediation efforts are documented and that the underlying cause is addressed to prevent recurrence. Question 11. The investigation demonstrates a critical vulnerability has been identified within a cloud-hosted application that processes sensitive customer data. The CCSP has the technical capability to directly access and remediate the vulnerability within the application's code. However, the cloud service provider, CSP, is responsible for the underlying infrastructure, and direct access by the customer to remediate infrastructure-level vulnerabilities is typically restricted by the Service-Level Agreement, SLA, and may have implications for data residency and sovereignty. The CCSP is under pressure to resolve the issue immediately to prevent potential data exfiltration. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Delay any remediation efforts until a formal request for remediation can be submitted and approved by the CSP to avoid any potential SLA violations. Option B. Disable the affected application service entirely to prevent any further exploitation until the vulnerability can be assessed and remediated by the CSP. Option C. Immediately access the cloud environment and remediate the vulnerability directly within the application code to prevent data exfiltration. Option D. Initiate the formal incident response process, which includes immediate notification to the cloud service provider, CSP, to collaborate on remediation efforts. Correct answer is C. Immediately access the cloud environment and remediate the vulnerability directly within the application code to prevent data exfiltration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a significant ethical and legal challenge for a certified cybersecurity professional, CCSP. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need to remediate a critical vulnerability with the potential for unauthorized data access and the subsequent legal and compliance ramifications. The CCSP must navigate the complexities of cloud security governance, data privacy regulations, and contractual obligations with the cloud service provider, CSP, without overstepping boundaries or creating new liabilities. The pressure to act quickly against a known threat must be weighed against the risk of violating data privacy laws and contractual terms, which could lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal action. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal incident response process that includes immediate notification to the CSP. This aligns with established cloud security governance principles and contractual obligations typically found in service-level agreements, SLAs. By notifying the CSP, the CCSP adheres to the principle of shared responsibility in cloud security, allowing the provider to address the vulnerability within their infrastructure while respecting data residency and sovereignty requirements. This proactive communication ensures that remediation efforts are conducted in a compliant and authorized manner, minimizing the risk of unauthorized access or data breaches that could violate regulations like GDPR or CCPA, depending on the jurisdiction. It also upholds the ethical obligation to act with integrity and transparency. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to directly access and remediate the vulnerability without informing the CSP. This action, while seemingly expedient, constitutes unauthorized access to the CSP's infrastructure and potentially to data not owned by the organization. This violates contractual agreements with the CSP, breaches data privacy regulations by potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized personnel, and undermines cloud security governance by bypassing established protocols. It also creates significant liability for the organization and the individual CCSP. Another incorrect approach is to delay remediation entirely due to the perceived complexity of obtaining authorization. While caution is necessary, inaction in the face of a critical vulnerability is a failure of risk management and a breach of the duty of care. This can lead to a significant security incident, resulting in data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage, all of which are far more severe than the potential issues arising from proper communication and collaboration with the CSP. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to remediate the vulnerability by disabling the affected service without proper consultation. This could have widespread operational impacts and may also violate contractual terms with the CSP regarding service availability. Furthermore, it does not guarantee that the underlying vulnerability is addressed at the infrastructure level by the CSP, potentially leaving the system exposed to other attack vectors. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a structured incident response framework. This typically involves 1. Identification and assessment, confirming the vulnerability and its potential impact. 2. Containment, taking immediate steps to limit the damage, which in a cloud environment often means involving the CSP. 3. Eradication, removing the threat. 4. Recovery, restoring systems to normal operation. 5. Lessons learned, reviewing the incident to improve future responses. Crucially, in a cloud context, communication and collaboration with the CSP are paramount at every stage, especially during containment and eradication, to ensure compliance with SLAs, data privacy laws, and shared responsibility models. Ethical considerations demand transparency and adherence to legal frameworks, prioritizing data protection and authorized actions. Question 12. The analysis reveals that an organization is migrating its application to a containerized microservices architecture using Kubernetes. To ensure the security of this new environment, which of the following approaches represents the most comprehensive and effective strategy for addressing the multifaceted risks associated with containerization, aligning with the principles expected for a certified cybersecurity professional? Option A. Conducting regular penetration tests on the deployed containerized applications and the Kubernetes control plane to identify exploitable vulnerabilities. Option B. Implementing robust network segmentation within the Kubernetes cluster and enforcing strict role-based access control (RBAC) for cluster administrators. Option C. Deploying advanced intrusion detection systems, IDs, at the network perimeter of the container infrastructure and focusing on securing the container host operating systems. Option D. Establishing a continuous security pipeline that includes vulnerability scanning of container images, runtime security monitoring for anomalous behavior, and secure configuration management of the Kubernetes environment. The correct answer is B. Implementing robust network segmentation within the Kubernetes cluster and enforcing strict role-based access control (RBAC) for cluster administrators. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexity of securing containerized environments, which are dynamic and distributed. The rapid adoption of containerization, particularly with orchestration platforms like Kubernetes, introduces new attack vectors and security considerations that differ significantly from traditional monolithic applications. Organizations must balance agility and innovation with robust security controls to protect sensitive data and maintain compliance. The challenge lies in selecting the most effective security strategy that addresses the unique risks associated with container lifecycles, from image creation to runtime execution and orchestration. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multi-layered security strategy that integrates security throughout the container lifecycle, encompassing image scanning, runtime protection, and secure orchestration. This aligns with the principles of DevSecOps and the shift-left security paradigm, which emphasizes embedding security early in the development and deployment process. Specifically, this approach addresses the CCSP domains by focusing on container image security, regularly scanning container images for known vulnerabilities and misconfigurations before deployment. Container runtime security, implementing runtime security tools to monitor container behavior, detect anomalies, and enforce security policies. Container orchestration security, securing the Kubernetes control plane and worker nodes, managing access controls (EAM), and implementing network segmentation. Container vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, proactively identifying weaknesses through automated scanning and targeted penetration tests. This comprehensive strategy is crucial for meeting regulatory requirements that mandate risk assessment, vulnerability management, and secure system configurations, as expected within the CCSP framework, which draws upon established cybersecurity best practices and standards. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on container runtime security without addressing image integrity, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It neglects the fundamental principle that a compromised image can lead to a compromised runtime, regardless of runtime defenses. This approach fails to meet the CCSP requirement for secure software development and supply chain security, as it allows potentially malicious or vulnerable code to enter the environment. Implementing container orchestration security in isolation, without considering image vulnerabilities or runtime behavior, is also insufficient. While securing Kubernetes is vital, it does not inherently protect against vulnerabilities within the containerized applications themselves or their underlying images. This oversight can lead to the exploitation of application-level flaws, bypassing orchestration-level security controls. Adopting a strategy that only involves periodic container penetration testing, without continuous scanning and runtime monitoring, is a reactive and incomplete approach. Penetration testing is valuable for identifying complex vulnerabilities, but is not a substitute for continuous security posture management. Relying solely on infrequent testing leaves the environment exposed to newly discovered or evolving threats between testing cycles, failing to meet the CCSP emphasis on proactive and continuous security monitoring. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a holistic and defense-in-depth strategy for container security. This involves 1. Understanding the entire container lifecycle and identifying security risks at each stage. 2. Prioritizing security controls that address the most critical risks, such as image integrity and runtime behavior. 3. Leveraging automation for continuous scanning, monitoring, and policy enforcement. 4. Ensuring that security practices align with relevant regulatory frameworks and industry best practices, as expected in the CCSP certification. 5. Continuously evaluating and adapting security measures to address the evolving threat landscape in containerized environments. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding the security posture of the organization's cloud network infrastructure, specifically citing potential vulnerabilities in inter-service communication and unauthorized access to sensitive data stores. The current architecture relies heavily on a single, broad firewall rule set at the edge of the cloud environment. The IT security team is proposing a significant overhaul to address these concerns, aiming to enhance protection without unduly impacting application latency or operational complexity. Which of the following approaches best addresses the stakeholder feedback and aligns with best practices for cloud network security and regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement granular network segmentation using virtual private clouds, VPC, and security groups. Deploy intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, for internal traffic monitoring. Enforce strong encryption for data in transit using TLS, and establish robust network access control (NAC) policies to enforce least privilege. Option B. Focus on strengthening the existing perimeter firewall by adding more advanced threat detection signatures and increasing its processing capacity to handle higher traffic volumes. Option C. Disable detailed network traffic analysis and logging for non-critical services to reduce the overhead on network devices and improve overall application response times. Option D. Consolidate all cloud network resources into a single, flat network segment to simplify management and reduce the number of firewall rules that need to be maintained. The correct answer is A. Implement granular network segmentation using virtual private clouds, VPC, and security groups. Deploy intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, for internal traffic monitoring. Enforce strong encryption for data in transit using TLS, and establish robust network access control (NAC) policies to enforce least privilege. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for enhanced network security with the potential impact on application performance and user experience, all while adhering to stringent regulatory compliance requirements. The cloud environment's dynamic nature and shared responsibility model add layers of complexity. Careful judgment is required to select security controls that are effective, efficient, and compliant without introducing undue risk or operational overhead. The correct approach involves implementing a layered security strategy that leverages cloud-native security services and integrates them with existing security policies. This approach prioritizes network segmentation using virtual private clouds, VPC, and security groups to isolate sensitive workloads and limit the blast radius of any potential breach. It also incorporates robust intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDs/IPS, configured to monitor traffic within and between segments, along with network traffic analysis tools to identify anomalous behavior. Furthermore, it emphasizes the use of strong encryption protocols like TLS for data in transit and ISEC for secure site-to-site connectivity, aligning with best practices for data protection and regulatory mandates for confidentiality. Network access control (NAC) mechanisms are crucial for enforcing least privilege and ensuring only authorized entities can access network resources. This comprehensive strategy directly addresses the stakeholder feedback by enhancing security posture while being mindful of operational impact, and it aligns with CCSP domain principles for secure cloud network architecture, access control, and incident response. An incorrect approach of solely relying on perimeter firewalls without granular internal segmentation fails to address the lateral movement of threats within the cloud environment. This leaves the organization vulnerable to sophisticated attacks that bypass initial defenses, violating the principle of defense in depth and potentially contravening regulations that mandate protection of sensitive data regardless of its location within the network. Another incorrect approach of deploying a single, overly permissive firewall rule set for all cloud network traffic, while seemingly simplifying management, creates a significant security gap. This broad access increases the attack surface and makes it difficult to isolate compromised systems, directly contradicting the need for network segmentation and the principle of least privilege, which are fundamental to secure cloud operations and regulatory compliance. A third incorrect approach of disabling network monitoring and traffic analysis to improve application performance overlooks critical security requirements. This decision sacrifices visibility into network activity, hindering the ability to detect and respond to security incidents in a timely manner. Such a lack of oversight can lead to undetected breaches, data exfiltration, and non-compliance with regulations that require continuous monitoring and auditing of security controls. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment that considers the sensitivity of data, regulatory requirements, and the threat landscape. Security architects and engineers must evaluate various security controls, understanding their impact on performance, cost, and manageability. They should prioritize solutions that offer a balance of security effectiveness and operational efficiency, leveraging cloud-native capabilities where appropriate. Continuous monitoring, regular auditing, and adherence to established security policies and procedures are essential for maintaining a secure and compliant cloud network environment. Question 14. To address the challenge of proactively defending a multi-cloud environment against sophisticated and rapidly evolving cyber threats, a cybersecurity team is tasked with enhancing their threat intelligence program. They have access to a vast array of threat feeds, vulnerability databases, and industry reports. Which of the following approaches best aligns with CCSP principles and regulatory expectations for effective threat intelligence utilization? Option A. Subscribe to every available threat intelligence feed and conduct daily manual reviews of all raw data to identify any potential indicators of compromise, without a specific focus on the organization's unique cloud architecture or industry. Option B. Focus solely on threat intelligence related to general malware and phishing campaigns, as these are the most common attack vectors, and integrate this intelligence into endpoint detection and response (EDR) solutions, disregarding more sophisticated or cloud-specific threats. Option C. Develop an internal threat intelligence team that manually analyzes all incoming threat data, creating detailed reports that are then distributed to relevant IT personnel for ad hoc review and implementation, without a defined process for integration or automation. Option D. Implement a comprehensive threat intelligence platform that ingests a wide variety of threat feeds, categorizes them based on relevance to the organization's cloud services and industry, and automates the correlation of this intelligence with internal security telemetry to identify and prioritize potential threats for incident response and vulnerability management. The correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive threat intelligence platform that ingests a wide variety of threat feeds, categorizes them based on relevance to the organization's cloud services and industry, and automates the correlation of this intelligence with internal security telemetry to identify and prioritize potential threats for incident response and vulnerability management. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud security, effectively leveraging threat intelligence to proactively defend against evolving threats within a regulated environment. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for timely threat mitigation with the strict adherence to regulatory frameworks, specifically the CCSP exam's implied jurisdiction, typically US-centric for broad cybersecurity certifications, unless otherwise specified, implying adherence to NIST, GDPR if applicable to data processing, and general U.S. federal regulations like FISMA or HIPAA, if relevant to the context. The complexity arises from the sheer volume of threat data, the need to discern relevant intelligence, and the imperative to integrate it into existing security controls without introducing new vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. Misinterpreting or misapplying threat intelligence can lead to wasted resources, missed threats, or regulatory noncompliance, all of which have significant business and legal ramifications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of identifying relevant threat intelligence sources, analyzing the intelligence for actionable insights specific to the organization's cloud environment and industry, and then integrating these insights into the existing security posture. This includes updating security controls, refining incident response playbooks, and informing vulnerability management priorities. This approach is correct because it aligns with best practices for threat intelligence lifecycle management, as outlined by frameworks like NIST SB 800-150, Cybersecurity Risk Management, and general CCSP domain principles. It emphasizes a proactive, risk-based strategy, ensuring that security investments are targeted and effective. Regulatory justification stems from the expectation that organizations will implement reasonable and appropriate security measures to protect sensitive data and systems, which is a core tenet of most cybersecurity regulations. By actively consuming and acting upon threat intelligence, an organization demonstrates due diligence in its security efforts. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on ingesting the largest volume of threat feeds without a clear analysis or integration strategy is incorrect. This leads to information overload and a failure to derive actionable intelligence, wasting resources and potentially masking critical threats within the noise. It fails to meet the regulatory expectation of effective risk management. An approach that prioritizes integrating generic threat intelligence without considering the specific cloud services in use or the organization's industry is also incorrect. Cloud environments have unique attack surfaces, and industry-specific threats require tailored responses. This approach risks misallocating resources and failing to address the most pertinent threats, potentially violating compliance requirements related to specific industry data protection, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare. An approach that relies exclusively on manual analysis of threat intelligence without any automation is inefficient and unsustainable in the face of the current threat landscape. While manual analysis is crucial for nuanced interpretation, a complete lack of automation hinders timely response and proactive defense, which can be seen as a failure to implement adequate security measures under regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured threat intelligence lifecycle approach. Planning and direction, collection, processing, analysis, dissemination, and feedback. This involves understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, identifying relevant and reliable intelligence sources, both open source and commercial, and establishing clear criteria for evaluating and prioritizing intelligence. The integration process should be phased, focusing on how intelligence can inform and enhance existing security controls, incident response, and vulnerability management. Continuous evaluation and refinement of the threat intelligence program are essential to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory requirements. Question 15. The review process indicates that a cloud security team is evaluating strategies to enhance security posture within a DevOps pipeline that heavily utilizes infrastructure as code, ISC. They are considering several approaches to automate security checks and remediation for ISC deployments. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of DevSecOps and provides the most effective continuous security assurance for ISC? Option A. Conducting manual security reviews of all ISC code changes by a dedicated security team before they are merged into the main branch. Option B. Relying exclusively on periodic post-deployment vulnerability scans of the deployed cloud infrastructure to identify and address security weaknesses. Option C. Implementing automated scanning of ISC templates for misconfigurations and policy violations directly within the CI/CD pipeline, coupled with automated remediation workflows for identified issues before deployment. Option D. Prioritizing the speed of ISC deployment and only performing ad hoc security checks when a significant incident occurs. The correct answer is C. Implementing automated scanning of ISC templates for misconfigurations and policy violations directly within the CI/CD pipeline, coupled with automated remediation workflows for identified issues before deployment. Explanation. The review process indicates a common challenge in cloud security, balancing the speed of DevOps with robust security controls, particularly when using infrastructure as code, ISC, and automation. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that automated security checks are not merely performative, but are deeply integrated into the CI/CD pipeline and effectively address potential vulnerabilities introduced by ISC deployments. This requires a nuanced understanding of how different automation tools and frameworks interact with cloud environments and regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is needed to select and implement solutions that provide comprehensive security assurance without unduly hindering development velocity. The correct approach involves leveraging a combination of ISC scanning tools, integrated security testing within the CI/CD pipeline, and automated remediation capabilities. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the core principles of DevSecOps, embedding security early and continuously. Specifically, it aligns with best practices for cloud security automation by ensuring that security is treated as code, allowing for consistent and repeatable security configurations. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed in this prompt, generally mandate a risk-based approach to security, requiring organizations to identify, assess, and mitigate vulnerabilities. Automating these checks and remediations in the ISC phase significantly reduces the attack surface and the likelihood of deploying insecure infrastructure, thereby supporting compliance with general security mandates. An incorrect approach that relies solely on post-deployment vulnerability scanning fails to meet the professional standard. This is because it introduces security risks by allowing potentially vulnerable infrastructure to be deployed into the production environment, even if only temporarily. The regulatory and ethical failure here is a lack of due diligence and a reactive rather than proactive security posture, which can lead to breaches and non-compliance with security obligations. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on manual security reviews of ISC templates, while better than no review, is professionally insufficient in a DevOps context. The sheer volume and velocity of ISC changes in modern DevOps environments make manual reviews a bottleneck and prone to human error. This approach fails to scale and does not provide the continuous assurance required for cloud-native development, potentially leading to the deployment of insecure configurations and subsequent regulatory noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over any form of automated security validation in the ISC process is professionally negligent. This approach completely disregards the fundamental security principle of shift left, allowing insecure code to bypass all security checks. The ethical and regulatory failure is a direct abdication of responsibility for securing the cloud environment, creating a high risk of data breaches and significant compliance violations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the organization's risk appetite, regulatory obligations, and the capabilities of available cloud security automation tools. It requires understanding the entire lifecycle of cloud infrastructure deployment, from code commit to production. Professionals should prioritize solutions that offer continuous security validation, automated remediation, and clear visibility into security posture, ensuring that security is an integral part of the automated workflow, not an afterthought. Question 16. What factors determine the appropriate mobile device security controls for an organization operating under U.S. federal regulations, considering both data protection mandates and user privacy rights? Option A. The adoption of the most advanced mobile security technologies available, regardless of their alignment with specific regulatory requirements. Option B. The specific U.S. federal regulations and industry frameworks applicable to the organization's data and operations, alongside a risk assessment of mobile threats and a privacy impact assessment. Option C. The prioritization of user convenience and access to mobile devices, with security measures implemented only as a secondary consideration. Option D. The implementation of generic, widely accepted mobile security best practices, without specific consideration for U.S. federal legal obligations or privacy impact. The correct answer is B. The specific U.S. federal regulations and industry frameworks applicable to the organization's data and operations, alongside a risk assessment of mobile threats and a privacy impact assessment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex and evolving landscape of mobile device security within a specific regulatory framework. The Certified Cybersecurity Professional (CCSP) exams implied jurisdiction, which typically aligns with U.S. federal regulations and industry best practices. The core challenge lies in balancing security imperatives with user privacy and operational efficiency, all while adhering to stringent compliance mandates. Careful judgment is required to select controls that are both effective against mobile threats and legally permissible. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of applicable U.S. federal regulations and industry frameworks relevant to data protection and mobile device usage. This includes understanding requirements from NIST, e.g., SB 800-171 for QE, SB 800-53 for security controls, HIPAA for healthcare data, PCI DSS for payment card information, and potentially state-specific privacy laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. The justification for this approach is rooted in the legal and ethical obligation to protect sensitive data, maintain user privacy, and avoid significant penalties for noncompliance. Adhering to these established standards ensures that mobile device security measures are not only technically sound, but also legally defensible and ethically responsible. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the latest mobile security technologies, without considering regulatory mandates, fails to address the fundamental compliance requirements. This oversight can lead to significant legal liabilities and reputational damage, as technology alone does not guarantee adherence to laws like HIPAA or NIST guidelines. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes user convenience over security and privacy, even if it aligns with some perceived industry trends, is professionally unacceptable. This disregard for security principles and privacy rights violates ethical obligations and can expose the organization to data breaches, regulatory fines, and loss of trust, irrespective of any technological advancements. A third incorrect approach that relies on generic, nonspecific security best practices without mapping them to the specific regulatory context of the organization is also flawed. While general best practices are valuable, they are insufficient for demonstrating compliance with specific legal requirements. The professional reasoning process should involve identifying all relevant regulatory frameworks, assessing the organization's data handling practices, and then selecting and implementing mobile security controls that demonstrably meet or exceed these legal and ethical obligations. This systematic approach ensures that security measures are both effective and compliant. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows a cloud security program struggling to effectively detect and respond to threats due to an overwhelming volume of undifferentiated alerts and insufficient correlation of security events across multiple cloud services. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge, while adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks and CCSP best practices for cloud security monitoring and logging? Option A. Increase the volume of log data collected from all cloud resources and rely solely on the native alerting capabilities of each individual cloud service to notify security personnel of potential issues. Option B. Focus on reducing the cost of cloud logging by archiving most historical logs and disabling detailed monitoring for non-critical cloud resources, prioritizing only high-level availability metrics. Option C. Develop custom scripts to parse raw log files from each cloud service independently and manually analyze them for suspicious activity on a weekly basis. Option D. Implement a security information and event management (SIEM) solution that ingests logs from all cloud services, establishes correlation rules based on threat intelligence, and configures tiered alerting based on severity and potential impact, supported by regular security reporting and auditing. The correct answer is D. Implement a security information and event management (SIEM) solution that ingests logs from all cloud services, establishes correlation rules based on threat intelligence, and configures tiered alerting based on severity and potential impact, supported by regular security reporting and auditing. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical need for a robust cloud security monitoring and logging strategy that aligns with the Certified Cybersecurity Professional (CCSP). Exams focus on U.S. regulatory frameworks and best practices. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing comprehensive security visibility with the operational overhead and potential for alert fatigue. Professionals must carefully select monitoring and logging approaches that not only detect threats, but also support compliance and operational efficiency. Correct approach involves a layered strategy that prioritizes actionable intelligence derived from integrated cloud monitoring and logging tools, feeding into a SIEM for correlation and analysis, and then triggering specific, well-defined alerts. This approach is justified by U.S. regulation such as NIST SB 800-53, which mandates continuous monitoring and logging for security events, and the principle of least privilege in alerting, ensuring that only significant events trigger notifications to avoid overwhelming security teams. It also aligns with CCSP domain principles by emphasizing the importance of understanding the cloud provider's shared responsibility model for logging and monitoring. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on collecting all available logs without intelligent analysis risks overwhelming security personnel and obscuring genuine threats within a sea of data. This fails to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements for effective incident detection and response, potentially leading to missed critical events. Another incorrect approach that relies exclusively on generic cloud provider alerts without a centralized SIEM or correlation engine will likely result in fragmented visibility and an inability to detect complex, multi-stage attacks that span different cloud services. This approach neglects the need for a unified view of security posture, which is essential for effective threat hunting and incident investigation under U.S. compliance mandates. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes cost optimization above all else, leading to the exclusion of critical logging or monitoring capabilities, is ethically and regulatorily unsound. While cost is a factor, it cannot compromise the fundamental security and compliance requirements mandated by U.S. law and industry standards. This approach risks significant financial and reputational damage if a security incident occurs due to insufficient monitoring. The professional decision-making process should involve a risk-based assessment of monitoring and logging requirements, considering the sensitivity of data, regulatory obligations e.g., HIPAA, PCI DSS if applicable, and the threat landscape. This assessment should guide the selection of tools and the configuration of monitoring and alerting mechanisms to ensure that security teams receive timely and relevant information for effective threat detection and incident response, while also supporting compliance audits and performance monitoring. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a robust data loss prevention (DLP) solution will significantly reduce the risk of sensitive data exfiltration, a key concern highlighted in recent internal audits and aligned with NIST SB 800-53 Control Family SC, System and Communications Protection. However, the initial capital expenditure and ongoing maintenance costs for the recommended DLP solution are substantial, leading some stakeholders to suggest delaying the full implementation in favor of a less comprehensive, more cost-effective monitoring tool that offers partial visibility. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cybersecurity professional? Option A. Accept the less comprehensive monitoring tool as a temporary measure to address immediate budget constraints, with a commitment to revisit the full DLP solution in the next fiscal year. Option B. Defer any new security investments, including the DLP solution, until a more favorable economic climate allows for the full budget allocation, relying on existing security measures. Option C. Advocate for the full implementation of the recommended DLP solution, emphasizing its direct alignment with risk mitigation and regulatory compliance objectives, and propose a phased implementation plan to manage costs. Option D. Recommend implementing only the monitoring tool, arguing that any level of visibility is better than none, and that the cost savings are paramount given current economic conditions. The correct answer is C. Advocate for the full implementation of the recommended DLP solution, emphasizing its direct alignment with risk mitigation and regulatory compliance objectives, and propose a phased implementation plan to manage costs. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity implementation, where a technically sound solution faces resistance due to perceived cost or operational impact. The professional challenge lies in balancing security requirements with business needs, ensuring compliance with relevant regulations, and making a defensible decision. Careful judgment is required to avoid overspending on unnecessary controls or, conversely, underinvesting in critical security measures that could lead to significant regulatory penalties or reputational damage. Correct approach involves prioritizing the implementation of security controls that directly address identified risks and are mandated or strongly recommended by the relevant regulatory framework. In this case, the CCSP exam syllabus implicitly points towards U.S. federal regulations and NIST guidelines for cybersecurity professionals operating within the U.S. This approach is justified because it aligns with the principle of risk management, which is fundamental to cybersecurity. By focusing on controls that mitigate the most significant threats and vulnerabilities, organizations can achieve a strong security posture efficiently. Furthermore, adherence to NIST SB 800-53, which is a cornerstone of U.S. federal cybersecurity, ensures that the implemented controls are recognized as best practice and meet compliance requirements, thereby avoiding potential fines and legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to defer the implementation of a critical security control solely because it requires significant upfront investment, even if the risk it mitigates is high and the potential cost of a breach or non-compliance is substantially greater. This fails to adequately address the risk appetite of the organization and ignores the potential for severe financial and reputational damage. Ethically, it represents a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting sensitive data and systems. Another incorrect approach is to implement a less effective, cheaper alternative that does not fully meet the security requirements or regulatory mandates. This is a failure of risk assessment and control selection, potentially leading to a false sense of security and continued exposure to threats, which is a direct violation of the duty of care expected of a cybersecurity professional. Finally, implementing controls based purely on the lowest cost without regard to their effectiveness or regulatory compliance is a significant ethical and professional failing, as it prioritizes short-term financial gain over long-term security and legal obligations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment, identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and the potential impact of their exploitation. This assessment should then be mapped against the requirements of applicable regulations and industry best practices, such as those outlined by NIST. The cost-benefit analysis should be used to inform, not dictate, the decision, with a clear understanding that the cost of non-compliance or a security incident often far outweighs the cost of implementing appropriate controls. Documentation of the decision-making process, including the rationale for selecting or rejecting specific controls, is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and accountability. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates a critical security incident involving unauthorized access to sensitive customer data hosted on a cloud platform. The incident response team has detected the initial intrusion and has evidence of data exfiltration. The team is faced with the immediate need to stop further data loss, preserve evidence for investigation, and comply with legal notification requirements. Which of the following approaches best balances these competing priorities in accordance with U.S. regulatory frameworks and cybersecurity best practices? Option A. Focus solely on eradicating the threat actor from the environment without immediate containment or forensic preservation to quickly restore normal operations. Option B. Immediately issue a comprehensive data breach notification to all potentially affected individuals and regulatory bodies based on the initial detection, without waiting for containment or detailed analysis. Option C. Immediately initiate containment measures to isolate affected systems and prevent further data exfiltration, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel to assess data breach notification obligations and begin preliminary notification preparations, and then proceed with forensic data collection and analysis. Option D. Prioritize a complete forensic analysis of the incident to understand the full scope and root cause before implementing any containment measures, to ensure no evidence is inadvertently destroyed. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate containment measures to isolate affected systems and prevent further data exfiltration, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel to assess data breach notification obligations and begin preliminary notification preparations, and then proceed with forensic data collection and analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud security incident response, balancing the urgency of containing a breach with the need for thorough forensic preservation and adherence to legal notification requirements. The complexity arises from the dynamic nature of cloud environments, the potential for rapid data exfiltration, and the strict legal obligations that govern data breaches, particularly under U.S. federal and state laws. Professionals must make rapid, informed decisions that minimize damage while ensuring compliance and maintaining the integrity of evidence for potential legal proceedings. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment to limit the scope of the breach, followed by a structured forensic investigation to understand the root cause and impact. This aligns with best practices outlined by NIST SB 800-61 Revision 2, which emphasizes a phased approach to incident response: preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. Crucially, it also incorporates the legal requirement for timely data breach notification, as mandated by various U.S. state laws, e.g., California's CCPA, New York's SHIELD Act, and federal regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare data. By initiating the notification process early, even if preliminary, the organization demonstrates due diligence and compliance with these stringent legal timelines, avoiding potential penalties and reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that delays containment to conduct a full forensic analysis first is flawed because it allows the threat actor more time to cause further damage or exfiltrate additional data, potentially exacerbating the breach's impact and increasing legal liability. It also risks the loss of volatile evidence if containment is not immediate. An approach that focuses solely on eradication without proper containment or forensic analysis risks reintroducing the threat or failing to fully understand the breach's scope, leading to incomplete remediation and potential recurrence. It also neglects the critical legal obligation for evidence preservation and notification. An approach that prioritizes immediate data breach notification without any containment or initial analysis is premature and potentially inaccurate. Providing incomplete or misleading information to affected individuals or regulators can lead to further legal complications and erode trust. It also fails to address the immediate security threat. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates technical incident response phases with legal and regulatory requirements. This involves establishing clear roles and responsibilities within the incident response team, including legal counsel and compliance officers, from the outset. A predefined incident response plan, informed by frameworks like NIST, should guide actions. The decision-making process should involve rapid assessment of the threat, immediate implementation of containment measures, concurrent initiation of forensic data collection, and timely engagement with legal counsel to determine notification obligations based on the type of data compromised and applicable U.S. laws. Continuous communication and documentation throughout the process are paramount. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to implement more robust security controls within the organization's public cloud infrastructure to address emerging threats. Which approach best balances the urgency of enhanced security with the need for operational stability and compliance? Option A. Implement new security measures during off-peak hours with minimal testing to expedite the deployment process. Option B. Immediately deploy the latest security patches and configurations recommended by the cloud service provider across all cloud environments. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential effects on existing services, applications, and data, and then develop a phased implementation plan based on the assessment findings. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of security controls that offer the most visible security improvements, regardless of their potential impact on current operations. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential effects on existing services, applications, and data, and then develop a phased implementation plan based on the assessment findings. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for enhanced security controls with the potential for significant disruption to critical business operations, and the need to adhere to established cloud security frameworks and compliance mandates. A hasty or poorly planned implementation of new security measures can lead to unintended consequences, including service outages, data loss, and non-compliance with regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective in mitigating identified risks and minimizes negative impacts. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment before implementing any changes. This assessment should systematically evaluate the potential effects of the proposed security enhancements on cloud services, applications, data, and user access. It necessitates engaging with relevant stakeholders, including IT operations, development teams, business units, and compliance officers, to gather comprehensive input and identify potential conflicts or dependencies. The outcome of this assessment informs a phased implementation plan, prioritizing critical systems and allowing for testing and validation in a controlled environment. This approach aligns with best practices in change management and risk management, ensuring that security improvements are implemented in a controlled, predictable, and compliant manner. Regulatory frameworks like those underpinning the CCSP certification emphasize a risk-based approach to security, requiring organizations to understand the potential impact of changes before deployment to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and to meet compliance obligations. Implementing security controls without a prior impact assessment is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks introducing vulnerabilities or causing service disruptions that could have severe operational and financial consequences. It fails to consider the interconnectedness of cloud components and the potential for cascading failures. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and responsibility towards maintaining service continuity and protecting organizational assets. Deploying security enhancements based solely on vendor recommendations without independent validation or an understanding of the specific cloud environment's architecture and dependencies is also professionally unsound. While vendor guidance is valuable, it may not account for the unique configurations, integration, and compliance requirements of a specific organization. This can lead to misconfigurations, security gaps, or unnecessary complexity, potentially violating compliance mandates that require tailored security solutions. Relying on a move fast and break things mentality for security enhancements is fundamentally incompatible with professional cybersecurity practices and regulatory expectations. Security is not an area where rapid, uncontrolled changes are acceptable. This approach disregards the principles of least privilege, change control, and risk mitigation, increasing the likelihood of introducing critical security flaws or operational instability. It demonstrates a disregard for the integrity and availability of services, which are core tenets of cybersecurity and often mandated by regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes identifying the security concern, assessing the potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluating the potential impact of these threats, and then determining appropriate controls. For cloud environments, this process must explicitly include an impact assessment phase that considers technical, operational, and compliance implications, engaging with all relevant stakeholders, documenting the assessment and the planned changes, and implementing a phased rollout with rollback capabilities are crucial steps in ensuring that security enhancements are effective, efficient, and compliant.